Thank you for tuning in to the GSMC Basketball Podcast, brought to you by the GSMC Sports Network. I'm your host, Nelson, today on this very nice Wednesday afternoon, and March Madness has officially begun, so we're going to be looking at a lot of the matchups that happened previously last night, and as well as looking at some of the matchups that are going to happen tonight, and which teams I think are going to end up winning, and more so, we're going to focus on the games that happened previously. And in the second segment, we are going to be covering Lebron James, obviously. I'm sure you guys saw this coming. And his brand new podcast that he has with JJ Redick, and where he talks about basketball. We're going to talk a little bit about that, and as well as give a quick recap of all of the NBA games that went down last night. And because there was a lot of them and a lot of good stories that were generated from this, we also have our special fourth segment, as always, so stay in tune all the way up until the third segment to let you know exactly what that is. But before I begin, I'd like to remind everybody, please, to be sure to use the link that is in the description or the link that is displayed below the ticker on every single show segment. That is GSMCpodcast.net. Really helps the show, makes the show much more interactive between myself and you guys. Once again, the link is GSMCpodcast.net. Puts your comments directly in front of my screen. And with that out of the way, we can go right ahead and talk about the NCAA matchups that happened last night. And I didn't watch the first half of the first game that went down at 6:40. I'm just going to pull up the box scores real quick on that game, just so I know exactly what happened. Let me just pull this up real quick. So yeah, it was Howard going up against Wagner. I did not see the majority of the first half, but I did see the second half. I was there for the second half. I mean, forgive me, I am a busy student at this school, so I don't really have time for every single game of basketball. But this game was really close. Like, I will say, it didn't start out that way. Like, Wagner was up 38-27 after the first half, but then it really started to pick up a lot later going into the second half, and that's usually how a lot of these March Madness tournament goes. Like, most of the time they would have one team be the dominant team, like in what seems to be in full control of the game. However, then once the next half goes in, they make the adjustments, they sort of compose themselves, and eventually they make the game a lot more interesting. And I really thought that Howard was going to end up winning this game, but unfortunately they ended up losing at the very last minute. The final score was 71-68. It was just extremely painful the way that they lost, because the team ended up getting like 2 offensive rebounds, and they needed a 3 in order to tie the game and force the game into overtime. And they just couldn't buy a 3. Now, there was one instance in that game where it seemed like one of the players was fouled on a 3-point shot. And I really, I was expecting a foul, because I understand, like, the refs are a lot more lenient in college basketball when they're doing the NCAA tournament. Like, you might see, like, debates, and you might see, like, controversial no calls or controversial calls that happen in these games, and it really affects the outcome going forth. And it's like they're very lenient. The refs are very, very lenient when when going into this tournament. They allow the players to get really physical on the defense, and a lot of things that you don't think they're allowed to do in the NBA. They're allowed to do in college, and it's like it doesn't get called. Now, the reason why I'm bringing this up is because on one of the plays, the player did not have any room to land. And if you're watching NBA basketball and the shooter doesn't have room to land, most of the time it's going to be a defensive foul, and that results in 3 free throws if you're beyond the 3-point line. So I felt like they missed a call late in that game, but at the same time, like, I do understand, like, okay, these players, like, he might have missed the call, but at least they sort of let the players play and do their own thing, if that makes sense. Because it's like, you would hope that the game would be determined by the players more so than it would be determined by the ref. And that was a problem that a lot of people had during the Super Bowl 2 years ago when Kansas City went up against the Eagles, where there was a huge no call, and actually no, there was a flag thrown on what people believed should have been a no call, and it definitely soured the opinions of a lot of Eagles fans and a lot of fans who just don't like Patrick Mahomes. And I sort of understand that logic, because it's like, just let the players play. But if it's a foul, call it. Call it the way it is. It's a foul. But I digress on that entire thing. So the next game that happened was the University of, if the box scores would load, the University of Virginia, the Virginia Cavaliers, going up against Colorado State University. Now, this game, I have absolutely no idea how I was able to sit through this game. It was extremely tough. And the reason why I say it was tough is because the score going into the half was 27-14. So obviously both teams were nervous. And that's totally fine. Like, they're students and they got a lot more things to worry about, more so than a tournament game, on top of the fact that they really care about this tournament game. So the pressure, it can really get to some of these students. And this is sort of why the title is the way it is. The madness has begun, because it's like, good Lord, that first half score 27-14, that is a boring game to watch. And I don't want to sound rude or anything, but it's like, it was really, like, it gets really boring. And obviously when it's like their when their teams are not hitting shots, some might argue that it's like, oh, they're just playing really good defense. But sometimes, no, that's not the case. Sometimes the case could be that they're just missing a bunch of shots. And that's what was happening. Everyone was missing all sorts of shots. And what was absolutely absurd was how, when Virginia was going into the half, like, I'd say maybe like 5 minutes left, they went cold. They straight up could not hit a shot to save their life. And it took them 50 minutes of real time to get a basket. Like, the last time they scored a point was at 9:50 p.m. and then they went cold. And then their next bucket that they scored was at like 10:40. It was unbelievable. They opened up the half missing practically every single shot until, like, I'd say maybe when it was like the 15-minute mark, around there. I don't remember exactly. I do remember exactly the time of when they scored, which was like around 10:40 at night. And that time frame of that time frame of not really, like, that time frame of not scoring, like, it is in real time, so it's not like in game time. That's still a very long time of not seeing the ball go in the hoop. And when your team is struggling like that, you sort of, like, you need to see the ball go in the hoop, so that way you can sort of maintain that rhythm, like, or like try to get a rhythm going into the half. Like, that was not an ideal start for Virginia whatsoever going into the second half, and they really went out extremely sad to Colorado State. Now, Colorado State sort of did, like, they started out cold, but, like, they were up 27-14, obviously, but they still started out relatively cold because they were nervous. This team definitely showed that they are a lot better at composing themselves going into this game, because, again, going into the second half, they were the team that was scoring. They were the dominant team, scoring all of the baskets and getting the stops. And it was really bad. Virginia was airballing on threes. They were missing wide open mid-ranges. It was really bad shooting from Virginia. And Colorado was able to sort of capitalize on this with their defense and their offense being so elite. And it's like when you see the other team is missing shots and you're hitting shots, you're going to go on a run, especially in college basketball. And I sort of held on to like Virginia trying, like I didn't have them winning in this game, but I definitely held on to them because obviously, like since it's March Madness, anything could happen. And it's like it could be any moment in the game where the other team just doesn't hit shots and you're the team that ends up hitting shots. Like it could have gone the other way around. And obviously, like it's a very sad way to go out if you're Virginia, but the teams that ended up now, Wagner is going to be the 16th seed going into this tournament, and Colorado State is going to be the 10th seed going into the tournament. And the matchups that are happening today are going to be, if the thing would load so that way I could read, Grambling State going up against Montana State. This is for the 16th seed. And the next game after that is Colorado, not Colorado State, Colorado, like, you know, Coach Prime Colorado, and Boise State. So the teams that I think are going to make it out, I have a strong feeling in Grambling State winning this, and the Colorado game is a little bit more like, it's a little bit up in the air. It is a toss-up, and that's going to be the game to watch tonight. But I do think that the Buffaloes, they do have the best chance of making it to the tournament. Well, they are in the tournament, excuse me. I think they have the best chance of representing their team and winning this the first four matchups, because they have a better record than Oregon, and Oregon's usually really good at basketball. And I don't want to say that it's like a bias because of like Coach Prime. I understand Coach Prime has nothing to do with basketball and he's more football, but I really like Colorado as a school, and I really like all of their like sports programs. So I hope that they end up winning this matchup and they could represent their team from the Pac-12 going into the tournament. And Boise State, they would definitely put up a challenge. Like, I'm not saying that it's going to be definitely Colorado. However, and like a lot of other analysts who voted and made their brackets, it's sort of skewed between like, or it's sort of like they have no idea between who's going to win between Colorado and who's going to win between Boise. So it's a toss-up, again, like I said previously. So I really hope that Colorado ends up winning, because I was already wrong. Literally the very first game, I was already wrong on my predictions, and I don't like it. It's not a good sign. Like, I'm 50-50 right now. I'm 1 out of 2 in these predictions, and I really do not like being 1 out of 2, because when you actually go on into the bracket, I'm going to get really scared. Like, I just know for a fact that the first game of like the real tournament in the first round, it's going to be wrong, completely wrong in my favor, just because of this. And it's like the way that Howard lost, the way that they lost is just, it was very, very sad, because it's like they had opportunity after opportunity and they just couldn't capitalize on it. And I was so sad. I was so distraught, because I made the bracket with one of my roommates. Like, I helped him out. Like, which team is going to end up winning? And I'm like, it should be Howard. Like, definitely should be Howard. And it's like the very first game, it was wrong. And I just have bad luck. I just have bad luck with these tournaments. And it's partly the reason why I don't want to give any of you guys my predictions, because I just think they're going to end up being wrong with the way that my brackets have been turning out the last few years. Purdue, it's not looking good. It's just not looking good for me. So, but I digress. Now, with that, we're out of time with this first segment. So now I'm going to pivot over to NBA basketball and talk about LeBron James and his podcast with JJ Redick. Some of the things that was said, some of the things to expect, my opinions on it, that kind of thing. So I'll be right back after this short break.
I feel like I'm losing my mind. Is everybody in the world blind? Please, Lord, give me a sign. a sign. I feel like I'm losing my mind. Is everybody in the world blind? Please, Lord, give me a sign, a sign.
I wanna be the greatest. Everybody on the fake shit. I look around and feel like everybody is the fakest. I make this every day and I'm impatient, hoping one day I blow up from the basement. Statement, the top is so vacant. I don't hear shit that I think is amazing. Waiting for my day when I'm playing sold out shows for 1,000 faces. Hey, give me that crown, get in my way and to be put down. It ain't your place, all this my town. If I want that shit, then I'll get it right now. I'm losing it, the noose it fits, some losing shit, a stupid myth. You choose to live or choose to dip, you choose to fight or lose your grip and lose a gift. Oh.
I feel like I'm losing my mind. Is everybody in the world blind? Please, Lord, give me a sign, a sign. I feel like I'm losing my mind. Is everybody in the world blind?
And we are back with the second segment of the GSMC Basketball Podcast, brought to you by the GSMC Sports Network. And in this second segment, we are going to be looking at LeBron James's podcast, some of the things that he said on the podcast, as well as like just my overall opinions on the podcast in general. He's teamed up with JJ Redick on this, so before I begin, I'd also like to remind everybody to please go ahead and use the link to get your comments recognized. The link is in the description as well as below the ticker on every single show segment. That is GSMCpodcast.net. Really helps the show, makes the show much more interactive between myself and you guys. So with that out of the way, let's go right ahead and talk about LeBron James, you guys' favorite topic, and his podcast with JJ Redick. Now, usually, like a lot of basketball players have started making their own podcasts. A lot of athletes, a lot of influential people, they make their podcasts, and it's becoming a lot more popular now. It started with Paul George, and now it's just building and building and building to so many other people, and so many people have their own podcasts, so that way it allows them to have their own platform where they get to say their own opinions and they get to speak their mind, and it's starting to gain a lot of traction going into the media, because a lot of the things that these players say are either really funny, really egregious, really good takes, or things of that nature. Like there's always something that everyone always has something to say, and it could either be very famous, like very good things to say, or very infamous, like for example Gilbert Arenas and some of his egregious takes. One of his takes on his own podcast was like, no one is afraid of LeBron. That is just not true. That is completely untrue, and he's I don't know what he's speaking out of, but it's definitely not from his mouth and his mind. He is, and I'm sure you guys know exactly what I mean by when I say that, but regardless, he's delusional. He's ridiculous. Like, his takes are delusional at times, and he gets a lot of like attention from the media for his delusional takes, because saying that nobody was afraid of LeBron, I know he was afraid of LeBron going up against him, because this is something that you might not remember, but in the series when LeBron was, not necessarily when he was a rookie, but in his first stint on Cleveland, he would go up against the Washington Wizards, and guess who was the star player? Gilbert Arenas. LeBron walked up to Gilbert Arenas at one point, put pressure on him, iced him, saying, don't miss these free throws, and guess what he does? He misses those free throws. I don't know what he's talking about, saying that people aren't scared of LeBron when he was the very first person to be scared of LeBron. But I digress. Now, like, obviously, like, this podcast with LeBron, he has a lot of things that, like, sort of feel like that he feels like need to be said. And some of it is a little questionable. Like, he said that Drew Holiday got traded for a bag of chips, which is really funny, because it's like he's saying like the things that a lot of people like outside in the media would say, and he's sort of just projecting it more and giving a lot more people like that, oh, that is 100% true. He got traded for a bag of chips. But at the same time, that's a little bit disrespectful, because I don't really like saying that players get traded for a bag of chips, unless it's legitimately like a bag of chips or a printer like Kyle Korver. But I digress. So, on the podcast, one of the things that caught my attention that he did say was how Allen Iverson and Steph Curry are the most influential players in basketball that he has seen. So, I don't think he was really talking about himself, because obviously, like, LeBron James is one of the most iconic basketball players and is more iconic than both of them. But I sort of understand, like, I'm going to pull up the quote exactly. I still sort of understand, like, exactly what point he's trying to get to. I'm just going to pull it up real quick just to make sure that I got it right. So, they're the two most influential players in the NBA since he's been watching. So, by influential, I think he sort of means like people who like try to model their game after all of these players. And now, as you can see, going into this era, it's like a lot of casual players that just play ball, they focus on their handling and they focus on their three-point shooting, and that is directly a result of Allen Iverson and Steph Curry. We have somebody in the comments, so I'm just going to go ahead and like pivot all the way over to that. Curito MVP 11 asks, what should the Warriors do? With 4 question marks. Now, I'm not entirely sure. Like, I think he means like, I'm not entirely sure what you mean by that. Do you mean like what should they do now, or what should they do like going into next season? Because that's 2 different questions. I mean, what they should do now is try to find a winning formula and like try to find a way to win. That is like the important part, and see if they can try to avoid that play-in scenario, given how a lot of the teams in the West are really close in their records. So they need to go on a big win streak, and the only thing that like really I feel like really needs to be said and like they need to do is so Curito MVP, he says what should they do going into the next season? Okay, so that's a lot easier to answer. So going into next season, I really feel like they should try to get rid of Klay Thompson. Like, I just don't see him as I don't see him as a valuable player, or as valuable of a player as he was previous years, and I think he's sort of hindering this team with his shooting a lot more than Draymond Green is with his lack of offense. A lot of people, like, they would rather trade Draymond Green, but I just don't think that that's the right move, because, like, Draymond brings a lot of value to the team and a lot of defense to the team that the team needs going into next season and going, like, into the season now. And he does a lot of these little things, and not only that, he's also Steph Curry's pick and roll partner. Like, a lot of the times, Draymond Green is the one who sets up Steph, but for the next season, they have to take complete advantage of Stephen Curry and Jonathan Kuminga. Those two are the 1 and 2 options, and you have Draymond Green being that facilitator on the team. So I wouldn't be surprised if they try to completely revamp the entire lineup going into next season and bring in a lot better role players and a lot more consistent role players. But I really feel like their biggest problem is like just the fact that they can't hit shots when they need to hit shots. I don't know why, but that's sort of the vibe that I get when I watch this team, because like they rely a lot on the 3-point shot. And obviously like that's a very good thing, but it could end up being a really bad thing if Steph Curry's not playing very well. And most of the time, a lot of their losses are sort of like because of Steph Curry not really playing well. Like there will be games where he scores only 6 points. If that was LeBron scoring only 6 points, the media would be on his head. And that's sort of a lot of things that get overlooked because his piss poor shooting, it's definitely not helping the team. More so, Curito added in the comments, reason why I asked is because where I'm at they're saying Charlotte Hornets are 95% sure they're getting Stephen Curry after the season. Yeah, I feel like the only reason why they're that sure is because, Del Curry has a history with that team, and he also grew up in Charlotte, and it's like, I don't think they're going to get him. I really don't think that they're going to be able to nab Steph Curry. And I think that the big three, all of those guys, they're going to retire as Warriors. Like, I know I said Klay Thompson should probably, you should get rid of Klay Thompson, but I think they're going to bring him back for when he wants to retire. And I don't see Steph Curry going to the Hornets, especially in the position that he's in now. Like, he's not the type of player to be able to carry a team that's sorry. Now, that's just me, though. Whatever moves that Charlotte can make in the offseason to sort of, give Curry that incentive to, come over, maybe that would influence things. Maybe that would influence his opinions. But given Charlotte and their previous history with drafting and, making trades and things of that nature, I really do not think they're going to be enough and they're going to make good enough moves that would convince Steph Curry to go ahead and stay. And with that in mind, it's he's Steph Curry. He's going to be the face of the Warriors, and he's still in his prime. And right now, Charlotte is not in a spot to compete the same way that Golden State is in a spot to compete. I understand that Charlotte is in a much easier conference, so that might also play into him wanting to go there, but I don't see that happening. Now, one more comment for Caruto before I go ahead and talk about LeBron James. Klay Thompson is planning to re-sign for $18 million. I'll go ahead and look into that. I mean, if that is true, then, maybe they'll be a little bit more generous with Klay. But, again, I think they should, if they're not going to get rid of him, they should probably try to cut down a little bit on his minutes and put in other players because as of right now, he was in the starting lineup, then he got demoted down to the bench. He's sort of been playing a lot better on the bench, but again, this is not the same Klay Thompson that I'm used to watching. And now that he doesn't have his defense, which was sort of what made him so elite, he has to have the shooting. And he doesn't even have that elite shooting anymore. So it's you're stuck. You're stuck between a rock and a hard place where it's loyalty with Klay Thompson. He gave you 4 rings, throw up the 4. But is he really producing as much as when he had the 4 rings? No, he's not really doing that. But that's just my personal opinion on that. And I want to wrap up this segment talking a little bit about LeBron James and his podcast, saying that Steph Curry and Allen Iverson are some of the more influential players going into when he was watching the NBA. We see a lot of these casuals, they handle the ball a little bit more. A lot of things that Iverson did, they were sort of seemed to be carries with the way he would handle it, but now they're not carries, especially when you look at players like Ja Morant, who literally holds the ball like this most of the time when he's dribbling, and that's not getting called for being a carry. And they definitely influence the game in the sense that defense hasn't been wasn't prioritized in their game as much as offense was, given their height and their size. Because Allen Iverson, we all know he's one of the undersized guards standing at around, I believe, 6 feet tall. He might be a little bit shorter than that, but I do know he was one of the smaller guards, and he needed that edge because obviously he didn't really have competent defense, on-ball defense. He was able to get steals, but he didn't have much competent defense because of his height and his size not being able to allow that. So he needed to provide something on the offense, and obviously he's been the pioneer for a lot of crossover moves, and a lot of the things that he does with the basketball are absolutely ridiculous. He inspired Kyrie Irving, and he's inspired so many other point guards that are able to create shots for themselves and thus make it easier for them to create shots for their teammates. Before Iverson came in the league, we didn't really see that many guards trying to handle the ball that much in isolation, apart from Michael Jordan. But Michael Jordan mostly used the post-up to isolate. Even though he did dribble, he was able to dribble, he mainly used the post-up to run those isolations. Now with Iverson, we've seen him cross Michael Jordan, and it sort of evolved into what the guard position is today, where it's like you sort of have to be able to create that shot yourself. And then going into Steph Curry and how he was able to sort of change the game and influence the game, it's obviously his three-point shooting, because teams have sort of realized, okay, why would I take a mid-range when it's the exact same amount of points as a layup? Why not just take a three, back up a little bit, and learn how to take the three? And he's definitely, obviously, like, you can see it now. He's without a doubt changed the game, and I don't see a reason why he definitely like wasn't a big pioneer of NBA basketball. And one thing that LeBron does a lot is he sort of like, he gives credit to a lot of other players before he gives credit to himself. Sometimes, not all the time. There was this one time on a podcast where he was like, when I was able to come back from a 3-1 lead in the finals, that to me right there was made me the best player of all time. That's what he said on an interview at one point. And like, some people would only focus on that and say, oh, he's selfish. But in reality, like, LeBron really gives a lot of credit to a lot of other players in this league and a lot of his former teammates as well. Now, there is another comment, but I'll go ahead and acknowledge that in the third segment, because we are out of time for this second segment. So join me for the third segment as I go ahead and cover all of the NBA games that happened from last night, give a quick recap of the scores and things of that nature. I'll be right back to answer your question, Corrido, after this short break, so stay tuned for that.
For the best and latest podcasts available anywhere, go to the podcast app on your cell phone and type in GSMC to access free content-rich podcasts on health and wellness, book reviews, sports, entertainment, relationships, social media, movies, technology, finance, and even weird news. Subscribe and download the GSMC Podcast Network's family of shows, available everywhere podcasts are found.
And we are back with the third segment of the GSMC Basketball Podcast, brought to you by the GSMC Sports Network. And in this third segment, we're going to be doing a quick recap of all of the NBA games that went down last night. But before I do that recap, I want to sort of acknowledge Corrido in the comments. Corrido MVP 11, he started commenting like a few minutes ago, and he has one more comment saying that he modeled his game after Klay Thompson and Kyle Korver. As a 5'10" guy, it's hard to play basketball with taller players, and that's sort of like what I was getting at when I was like talking about like how Allen Iverson and Curry, like I wasn't really able to get to that as much as I wanted to, but he does make a valid point saying that it is difficult for like shorter players to go up against taller players, and it's like Iverson and Curry, they've sort of like changed that notion and be like, yes, you can bring value to the team despite being a bad defender and despite being relatively short. And there's two ways you could go about it. One way is with your shot creating and ball handling, Allen Iverson, and then the other way is with your shooting, hence, Steph Curry or Klay Thompson. Because with Steph Curry and his shooting, yes, Steph Curry does handle the ball at times, but there are also several times where Steph Curry runs around screens and tries to create open looks for him off the ball where he can catch and shoot and get himself into like very good positions to score. And that's sort of like part of Steph Curry's game and Klay Thompson's game that have revolutionized like the game of basketball, where it's like, sure, like maybe the guard is a little bit short, but he's a lot faster, and because he's faster, he can get open like running around screens and then shooting directly off the catch. And it's right now in this league, it is a good shot. And that's sort of like how Steph Curry has, one of the ways that Steph Curry has sort of influenced a lot of these players and how he's changed the game. Now, obviously, like, it's Steph Curry, so any type of three he takes is considered to be a good shot. So maybe don't chuck up a bunch of threes coming off the screen if that's not a good shot for you. Now, he has more in the comments. I had build up muscle to be a good defender. Well, yeah, like, obviously, like, I'm not trying to question your defense, but being 5'10", going up against someone that's taller than you, I mean, chances are they're going to be able to back you down or just shoot directly over your head. And that's sort of like where the defensive liability sort of comes into play. Again, you could always make up for it by getting steals and like either playing through lanes or like, swiping the ball at certain times. But, being tall is definitely an impact on your defense. Like, we see it in Victor Wembanyama, where it's like, since he's so tall and his frame is ridiculously tall, like, he can block the three-point shot, and he can obviously like contest a lot of shots, and it's very difficult for people to contest a lot of his shots. So we see how sort of height plays a very big factor in basketball, as well as on the defensive side of the ball. But it also could help you on the offensive side of the ball, given how, if you're short, you probably move a lot faster. But that's just me. So let's go ahead and talk about all of the games, or most of the games that happened last night in the NBA, because a lot of the focus was mainly in college basketball. Like, I didn't really watch a lot of the games because I was focused on college, and I really like watching college basketball in March a little bit more than I like watching NBA basketball, because it's more or less the same thing every single month with the NBA in terms of like basketball. It's like three-pointer after three-pointer after three-pointer. Not much defense being played, lazy defense being played, but in March, in college, whole different story. So let's go right ahead. Since we were talking about Victor Wembanyama, might as well go ahead and bring up the Spurs going up against the Dallas Mavericks. Now, the Mavs ended up winning 113-107. Luka Doncic ended with another triple-double, 18 points, 16 assists, and 10 rebounds. He did not shoot very well from the field, however, going 6 for 27. 2 for 12 from 3. But obviously, a win is a win is a win, and the fact that they were able to win despite like this really bad shooting, it's very impressive. Coming in from the rest of the team, not so much from Luka, because he did get a triple-double, and he was able to get a triple-double in this game, but still, like, his shooting was more so hurting the team than it was helping the team. Kyrie Irving ended the game with 28 points, 13 of 21 from the field, and 0 of 5 from 3. Again, not very good shooting from 3 coming in from Kyrie, but he's still a very good shot creator, and it's a nightmare going up against both of those two in terms of like guarding them in isolation and just guarding them in general. Whether it's a pick and roll or it's an isolation, they can create a shot over anyone, and they are a nightmare matchup to go into the playoffs, especially in the playoffs, because Luka Doncic, he seems to elevate his game when the lights shine brighter than anything else, and it's very scary going up against that. Devin Booker would know. Now, on the Spurs side, Victor Wembanyama, he ended the game with 12 points, 11 rebounds. He did not shoot very well from the field, 3 of 13, so his offense was a little bit meh in this game, but his defense, he ended the game with 6 blocks. And he's basically the only bright side on the defense that this team has. And that's sort of what's hindering him from being the defensive player of the year, in my personal opinion, because Rudy Gobert, every single team that he's been on, it's been number 1 or number 2 defensively. That is no coincidence. And while Victor Wembanyama has the individual stats, Rudy Gobert is sort of bringing that impact to the team, and it's sort of like, where do you draw the line on individual stats overtaking impact that the team is getting? Because Rudy Gobert's defense and like the impact that it's bringing, it's giving them like free wins. It's allowing them to win a lot of these games because of their defense. And it's really difficult. Like, for me, I can't pick who the who the defensive player of the year really is going to be this season, because I want to say it's Victor given his individual stats, but it's like, I don't really think it can be Victor because the value that he's bringing to his team and how, the Spurs were the first team to get eliminated from the playoffs. It's like the defense isn't really bringing that much value to the team. And I just have no idea, like, which one to pick in terms of, like, I really have no idea which one to pick in terms of, like, who should win the Defensive Player of the Year. But let me know what you guys think in the comments on who should win Defensive Player of the Year. I think want it to be Victor, but I really think it's going to be Rudy Gobert. That's just my personal take on it. And apart from Victor Wembanyama, there was also Trey Jones. But again, like, I'm not a really big fan of the Spurs team because they just don't like Victor. They really don't. I mean, it's gotten a lot better, and he's gotten a lot more touches, but still, it's like, I'm not a big fan of this team. I'm just not. Another team that I'm sadly not a fan of anymore is the Brooklyn Nets, because they just keep disappointing me. They just keep making me sad. It's every time they keep making me sad. They lost to the Pelicans 104-91. The Pelicans are a great team. I totally understand that. But Mikal Bridges, what happened to you? What happened to you? He shot 4 of 11 from the field, only 15 points. Not bad, but like, he was supposed to be the face of the team. And it's like, what is going on? Like, why are these Nets playing so bad? And I really think it's because of, like, their coach. Like, the new coach that they got, it's messing with, like, the system. Again, this would be, like, Mikal Bridges' like, third coach in the span of a few months. And, well, in the span of a year, excuse me. And it's like, he fell off a cliff. He's not the star player that I really thought he was going to be. And Crafty PG, I guess he's a friend of Crucial PG. Wemby's a problem. Now, I don't know what he means by problem. I'm not entirely sure if he means like he's a problem in a good way or he's a problem in like he's hurting the team. But he also said that Pop knows what he's doing. Like, does he really though? Like, does he really know what he's doing? The last times, like when you really think about it, the teams that he's led to success, they've had players like Tim Duncan, David Robinson, Manu Ginobili, Tony Parker, Kawhi Leonard. They all have had, like, they're all Hall of Famers. Like it or not, they're all Hall of Famers. And since they've been gone, the Spurs haven't been that winning team. So I think it's still up in the air. Like, I'm not trying to doubt, like, Pop and, like, what he's done in his career. But it's still up in the air if it's sort of like it was the players or if it was like if it was his actual coaching. At least now with the modern NBA and how a lot of these teams have adapted to the three-pointer, because the Spurs were actually the first team that tried taking a lot of three-point shots and like were very like used the corner three a lot more than most of the other teams like in the early 2000s going into like the 2010s. So now that the rest of the league has sort of caught up, what is Pop going to do? But that's just my take. That's just up in the air. That's up for debate still because, like, you know, Victor Wembanyama's only a rookie. So we'll have to see how this team, like, plays out and how, like, the rest of the players go about it. But it's still up in the air. I'm just gonna say that. Still up in the air on deciding whether or not Pop knows, like, what he's doing and whether he doesn't know what he's doing. Just throwing that out there. But more so on this Nets game, I might as well read the rest of the box scores. Zion ended this game with 28 points, 7 rebounds. CJ ended this game with 16 points. Brandon Ingram ended with 11. And Herbert Jones also ended with 11. Now, Zion has he's gotten a lot less talk around the media. I said this previously on my podcast, but again, it's like he was one of the most hyped prospects going into this league. And with him not playing games and with Stephen A. sort of insulting his weight problems, I don't think he has any problems with his weight. I think they're over-exaggerated. But he's definitely fallen off just a little bit. It might be partly because of like the Pelicans and their marketing, but I really, really want Zion to succeed. And he's not getting that coverage that I feel like he should be getting. Now talking more about like the Nets, you know, maybe we would be able to guard Zion if Ben Simmons actually decided to play a game. But no, he needs to sit out again. But I digress. Regardless, like I don't want to even think about the Brooklyn Nets as a franchise. They've just disappointed me like time in and time out. And it's really, really like I've had it with the team. Next on this list is the Orlando Magic beating the Charlotte Hornets. Orlando Magic. And Paolo Banchero ended the game 13 points, 5 assists. Not a very strong scoring night for him, but again, he only played 26 minutes. Jalen Suggs, another player who like he had a lot of hype coming from college, going into the NBA. He's hasn't really gotten that much talk. He ended the game with 16 points, 6 assists, and 4 rebounds. Obviously, like, with the Orlando Magic and their media coverage, I don't know what is wrong with their media team. They have not gotten enough coverage that they need. And it's a little bit disrespectful, especially when, like, a lot of these players, they're playing very well. And this might relieve a lot of pressure from them going into the playoffs because they are a relatively young team. And with them being a young team, the pressure of the playoffs, it might get to them a lot quicker and a lot more than a lot of these veterans who have been in the playoffs several times. And when a lot of these young players don't have that pressure of, like, people expect this from us, they have nothing left to lose, which makes them a much more dangerous team. And that's sort of like what I think the reason why Boston constantly loses every single time, because they have all of this expectation from their fans and from the rest of the media that it just gets to them, and that pressure really builds up and it gets to them. And obviously, like, as fans, we're sort of expected, like, we expect all of these players, especially Jason Tatum, to have that killer instinct and that Mamba mentality and that no pressure. Like, pressure is not a problem for any of these guys, but they're human like the rest of us. Pressure is eventually going to get to them. And it even got to Kobe in a lot of his playoff runs. Now, Kobe blew a 3-1 lead. A lot of people don't like bringing that up, but he did blow a 3-1 lead, and part of it was his fault. Kobe in 2004, he played in the finals against Detroit, and they ended up losing in that finals, and mainly because he did not play well, and the pressure got to him because he was taking a lot of shots, a lot of really bad shots. If you watch the series, Kobe was chucking, but regardless, like, going more into the box scores of this game. Brandon Miller ended the game with 21 points, 7 rebounds. He's been very good. Trey Mann, excuse me, I just saw T-Man. 11 points, 5 assists, and 4 rebounds. And Vasilije Micic, again, forgive me if I botched that name completely, ended the game with 20 points. Was really just scoring. He ended up getting 1 rebound, 1 assist, and 1 steal. Not really that impressive, but yes, he was shooting the ball really rather well in this game. Not enough to beat the Orlando Magic, however, so the Orlando Magic are going to be rolling all the way to the playoffs. Right now, they hold the 5th seed in the Eastern Conference, and they look ready to go up against the New York Knicks. It's definitely going to be a conflict of interest because then when they win, I can say Orlando Magic, but then when they lose, I can't say that anymore, and I really like saying that. But on the other hand, the Knicks win. So it's going to be a conflict of interest. I really hope that the Magic end up making it to, like, end up going into the 6th seed. I really feel like the 76ers are going to drop down a little bit more. And I want to see the Knicks match up against the Pacers. That's really who I want to see in the first round in that matchup. Because I really hope that the Knicks see that matchup. And I would like seeing the Magic go up against the Cavs as well. Because I think that would be a very good matchup between teams that are, like, not very popular in terms of media coverage unless they're on a ridiculous winning streak like Cleveland was. But I digress. So next game on this list is the Houston Rockets going up against the Wizards. Houston Rockets have been on a tear recently. They won 4 in a row, I believe, with Jalen Green ending the game with 42 points and 10 rebounds. Now, if you guys remember from the last episode, Crucial PG was in the chat, and he said, or he speculated, that one of the reasons for why Jalen Green was playing so good was because of his child. And that's exactly what Jalen Green said going into the post-game interview after he won that game. So shout out to Crucial PG for being absolutely spot on with that assumption. And again, 42 points, 10 rebounds. Maybe I was a little bit wrong about Jalen Green. Maybe he is a player that you could build your team around, and he could be the second option behind Sengun, or even the first option. I mean, with the way that he's playing, he's an absolute demon. Like, he hit another turnaround jump shot like he knew that was going in. Like, that is so cold. And again, he was going up against the Wizards, so it's like not really that impressive because like they are the Wizards, the worst team in the NBA. But still, turning around like after shooting a 3-ball is like, it's like you're that guy material, and it was really good to watch. It was really cool to watch. Amen Thompson, a rookie that I'm a pretty big fan of. 25 points and 10 rebounds. I think this was a great pickup for Houston, and he could be a very good third option, assuming they keep their core of players. Now, Dylan Brooks, 2 points. That's what he gets for being a trash talker. But regardless, this was a very dominant win coming in from Houston, and I really want to see them do this against a good team. Because if they can do this against a good team and keep this up, it could be a real problem going into the future. Because, again, I understand, Cleveland was a good team, but I want to see them do it against a really, really good team. But that's just me. It could have just been a game. It could have just been a good game coming in from them. But I digress. Now, before I wrap up this segment, we have another important game. The Timberwolves going up against the Denver Nuggets. I really should have talked about that game first, now that I think about it. The Nuggets almost ended up losing this game. Now, Jokic ended the game with 35 points and 16 rebounds, and they didn't have Rudy Gobert in the starting lineup for the Timberwolves. Not having Rudy Gobert and almost being able to, and losing by 3 points to the best team in the NBA now, that's not that bad. That's really not bad whatsoever. I don't think the Timberwolves should be upset at this loss. The Nuggets should be a little bit concerned about the fact that this game was really close. Michael Porter Jr., he ended the game with 26 points on 9 of 15 from the field. Jamal Murray ended the game with 18 points, 6 of 14. So, again, a pretty dominant performance from the rest of this. Jamal Murray also added 11 assists to go with that. Aaron Gordon, 14 points, 11 rebounds. Really dominant performance coming in from the Denver Nuggets. And the fact that the Timberwolves were still able to compete against them without having either Karl Anthony Towns or Rudy Gobert is very, very, very impressive. And this team might be a lot better than what I thought they were. And I had them as one of the teams that were potentially going one and done because I just don't trust the Timberwolves. But after this game, they could definitely put up a series against anybody, in my opinion. Anthony Edwards, great face for the Timberwolves. Definitely a great athlete. 30 points per game. Well, 30 points he had in this game. I don't know exactly if he's averaging 30 points per game. I'm going to see. No, 26.7. Really close to 30. But 30 points, 8 assists, 8 rebounds. Jaden McDaniels ended the game with 26 points. And one thing that was was actually really crazy was in the previous game that Anthony Edwards, he played against the Utah Jazz, he actually dislocated his finger after dunking the ball really hard. So he's a phenomenal athlete. But regardless, we're out of time for that third segment. So now I'm going to go ahead and go into the fourth segment where I go ahead and talk about how the president of basketball called out Joel Embiid and his decision for playing for Team USA. So I will be right back after this short break. And we are back with the final segment of the GSMC Basketball Podcast, brought to you by the GSMC Sports Network. And in this fourth segment, we are going to be talking about how the president of basketball just called out Joel Embiid. This was recently, so I literally just recently added this as the fourth segment. This was like about, about an hour ago, where the president of French basketball, he called out Joel Embiid, saying, Team USA, with him, who can beat you? Come on. Nobody. This is an easy way for him to get an Olympic medal. This was Jean-Pierre Ciutat, forgive me if I botched that name, on the Joel Embiid choosing Team USA over Team France. Now, I'm a little bit skewed on this because obviously, like, you know, as an American, I'm like, USA. So give me Joel Embiid on my starting lineup, yes, but I really wouldn't care if Joel Embiid was in the starting lineup, honestly. Like, I think his play style and him flopping 24/7 is actually going to hurt us more than it's going to help us. Because, let's face it, Joel Embiid's play style, it only works in the NBA. As I'm sorry to say, it only works in the NBA. The FIBA rules are a lot more different than the NBA rules. And, like, the Olympic rules are more different than the NBA rules. So when he goes into Team USA and in those Olympic games, I swear to God, if he complains to the ref even once, I'm actually going to lose it, because that's not going to fly over in overseas, because the game is played completely different over there. Like, they're much more strict on the carries. They're much more strict on, they're a little lackluster on the defensive side. Like, they actually allow the players to play defense and get really physical. And if Joel Embiid just keeps going like that 24/7 trying to get a foul, he's not going to get a foul. The refs don't care. They're going to call it the way they see it. And if the person is flopping, it's not going to fly. Like, I watched the Redeem Team documentary, and one of the challenges that Team USA had to face was how the FIBA rules were a little bit different than the regular NBA rules that they're used to. And not only that, the basketball was also relatively different. And so they had to come into this game with a different mentality. It's not now, especially now with how advanced the game is and how other countries have sort of caught up to Team USA in terms of skill gap, it can't just be like, oh, we'll put in a random team like with a bunch of the best players in the league and boom, that's our Team USA. Like, that used to work, but now that the world has sort of caught up with us, it doesn't really work all that well. And not only that, other players from, like, other big teams, like, for example, Luka Doncic, Giannis Antetokounmpo, Jokic, they're all going to be representing their own country in the Olympics. And they obviously, like, they had the option to go play for Team USA, but they chose not to. So seeing that Joel Embiid decided to choose to play for Team USA, it was almost as if he was trying to take the easy way out. Hence the title of this segment, The Easy Way Out. And we see that a lot now. And we've seen that in the NBA. We see that every single time that a player picks, like, decides to play for Team USA. And they really like taking the easy way out. And with Joel Embiid's case, carrying the French team, I don't see why he wouldn't want to do that, but at the same time, I do see why he would want to just stay with Team USA, because it is usually an easy gold medal for Team USA. Basketball is like, it's our sport to lose, and it's like, if we end up losing, it's a really, really big deal. But so I guess Joel Embiid, like, he obviously, like, he doesn't want to lose. He's tired of losing, and it makes sense, but I didn't really see him picking the French team over Team USA. Like, it's really difficult for them to do that. Obviously, Luka, it makes sense why Luka would decide to pick his team over Team USA. He's been playing with that team since he was a teenager. Same thing could be said about Giannis, and the same thing could be said about Jokic. And all of those players, like, they get a lot of respect from that country. And it's like, it feels like you're getting stabbed in the back when one player decides to choose Team USA as opposed to their own country or where they were from. And I really see that. And this has sort of been like, players picking the easy way out, it's been a problem, unfortunately, since LeBron. Like, a lot of people think it started with LeBron, and in a way, it sort of did, because LeBron James, there's a lot of context behind it. I'm not going to say LeBron took the easy way out, but there is a lot of context. The Cavs, they just weren't giving him the right pieces. They weren't hitting on the right draft picks. The players that they were getting, they were only really good in the regular season, and in the playoffs, they just didn't provide as much as you'd expect. They missed out on several players that were literally handed to them on silver platters, and they just didn't do anything with it for some reason. And that sort of forced LeBron's hand to just leave the organization entirely. And that was sort of like the start of players taking the easy way out. Because in everyone's eyes, when LeBron James joined the Miami Heat and Chris Bosh also joined the Miami Heat, it was like no team was going to be able to beat them. That was sort of the thought process. And the reason why I don't really blame LeBron for doing that is because, one, the Cavs literally were doing nothing for him. They were not helping him in the slightest. And I don't understand why you'd expect someone to stay on the team when the team isn't helping them win. And he needed to win. You needed to win. He had an expectation to win the second he stepped foot in the league. But I digress on that. And then obviously, it wasn't a guaranteed win for LeBron James because he still had to go through the Boston Celtics, who still had their big three. Granted, they were getting older, but still, that big three was still a very dominant piece in the West. And having LeBron on the Heat, it sort of seemed like, that was a surefire way to win, at least on the Heat side, on the Heat standpoint. And that sort of set the tone for a lot of these other teams deciding to sign with different teams in free agency and form their own really good team. But I think this really kicked off when Kevin Durant decided to make that weak move and join Golden State. I will blame KD till the day I die. He should never be forgotten that he made that move. Never in the history of basketball should anyone forget that Kevin Durant made the spineless, the softest, the weakest move in NBA history by joining Golden State. The team that beat him, the team that won 73 games, the team that has proven that they don't need him to win, decided to get him in free agency. And that set the tone for a lot of these players trying to find an easy way out. Because that's what Kevin Durant did. He tried to find an easy way to get rings because he felt that was the argument as to why he wasn't on the same level as LeBron. He didn't have the rings. So he thought, let me join a team that could help me win those rings so that way he could destroy the argument. It actually made the argument worse. He ended up regretting it in a quote saying, "I don't know why you let me do this," to his agent. You can Google it if you guys don't believe me. But he ended up completely despising the move, but the deed was already done, and so we had to play through it. And with that in mind, it damaged his legacy, it damaged his reputation, especially now with what he's done in the playoffs. He's only made it as far as the second round after his departure from Golden State. He is clearly not that guy. He is not that player. He will never be on LeBron's level. He will never be in GOAT conversations. He is soft for that. And that was the start of players taking the easy way out, because shortly after that, several different super teams started to form. OKC, they tried making their super team with Carmelo Anthony and Paul George. Didn't really work. And Russell Westbrook. I forgot to add him. The Lakers, they ended up trying to get LeBron James, and they did getting LeBron James. Houston signing Chris Paul, and what other moves were made? And there were several other moves, and then later on, the Clippers getting Kawhi Leonard, the dynamic duo. The Lakers getting Anthony Davis. The Celtics teaming up with, pairing Jaylen Brown and Jason Tatum, and now being the team that they are, being the super team that they are. Kyrie Irving, deciding to join the Nets with Kevin Durant, and then James Harden joining the Nets to help him try and win the championship. And then James Harden leaving the Nets because they weren't really in championship contending mode to go join the Sixers. and then leaving the Sixers to go join the Clippers, who are in contending mode. A lot of players, like, they take the easy way out, is what it seems like. And it's a new era in basketball where it's like they're taking the easy way out, and they just want to win because the media, it sort of forced that hand on them. I mean, that's the old, honestly, this is the old heads' fault. This is, like, I don't want to be disrespectful in calling them old heads, but, like, this is, like, the old people's fault, like, the people that watched MJ, because what is the argument for Michael Jordan? He has 6 rings. So it's like, it's sort of skewed the media, and it's turned the media into thinking that if you don't have rings, you're not an all-time great, and you shouldn't even be worth acknowledging. And that's the old heads' fault. That's simply their fault, because if the argument wasn't that he has rings and that he has all these individual accolades and things of that nature, nobody would be bothered by the ring debate. But now everyone needs to win in order to be remembered, and it's like, it's very, very scrutinizing now. Like, players like T-Mac, players like Carmelo Anthony, players like Grant Hill, Derrick Rose. I don't like Derrick Rose in particular. I just gave him as an example. All of these types of players, they sort of don't get enough respect from any of the media because they haven't won. And it's unfair. Especially Melo's case, because Melo won Olympic gold medals. Forget championships. Melo won gold medals representing his country. That deserves a lot of respect. But he doesn't get that respect because everyone's like, oh, he didn't win a ring. He didn't win an NBA championship. So it's like, what? That's completely unfair. But that's all I really wanted to say about all of these players taking the easy way out. And with that, we are out of time for this 4th segment. Thank you guys so much for tuning in to the GSMC Basketball Podcast, brought to you by the GSMC Sports Network. Your support means a lot to us, so please remember to subscribe to the show. Leave a positive review. It really does make a difference. Leave a nice comment on any of the videos that I do or any of the segments that I do. Also, watch some of the other shows because we do have a lot of other podcasts. Like, we have the sports podcast, we have the football podcast, we have the baseball podcast, where, TJ does the sports podcast, Kenneth does the football podcast, Sam does the baseball podcast. Shout out to all of them. They do a great job in handling the show. So go ahead and tune into some of their shows and go ahead and watch. Like, I believe either Sam or TJ are going to be live directly after me, but I'm not entirely sure. Just go ahead and check. Now, we also invite you to follow us on Facebook, Twitter, TikTok, and Instagram for more content and updates. And before I end, I say one more final goodbye. I'd like to remind everybody to please use the link in the description to go get your comments recognized. It puts your comments directly in front of my screen. That is GSMCPodcast.net. Really helps the show, makes the show much more interactive between myself and you guys. And that is the end of the show. Thank you once again. I am your host, Nelson. And as always, take care.
Let's go. I wake up to a little bit of drool on my pillow, feel like it's gonna be a bad day. Yeah, I'm tired of shit, and the coffee ain't hit yet. Damn, ain't that great.